HR.
I see my name in shining lights, yeah, a different city every night. Oh, I swear the world better prepare for when I'm a billionaire.
It's time to get down to business on the weekend's #1 business program. Known as the King of Networking, your host, Shalom Klein, has worked with thousands of entrepreneurs and created countless jobs. So, to success. Let's get down to business.
And indeed, we are all about small business jobs and entrepreneurship and business. We talk a lot about business here. You're on with Get Down to Business, and I'm your host, Shalom Klein. Remember, you can always download podcasts from Get Down to Business on my website at shalomklein.com. While you are there, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Shalom Klein. It's going to be a jam-packed week of content and information you will not want to miss. It's a live show. Indeed, we are surviving through the coronavirus. We're doing the live show from the beautiful studio here in Elk Grove Village. Call into the studio, 312-642-5600, 312-642-5600. And as you heard a moment ago, we are powered by our good friends at Tandem HR, your solution center. Give them a call, 630-928-0510, and check out their website, tandemhr.com. So I'm thrilled to kick off today's conversation with a fantastic subject matter expert on becoming a matrix leader. Today's top organizations, many of which you have heard of, such as PepsiCo, Disney, Microsoft, are turning to a matrix structure, leaving old hierarchies behind for a far more innovative and powerful model. I've been fascinated by this, and that's why I've got John Futterknecht, the president and co-founder of Optimum Associates. John, welcome to the program.
Shalom, it's great to be here. And let me just say, first thing, how impressed I am with how smoothly you just pronounced my last name. It's extremely rare.
I've been practicing. So, John, thank you for that. So, the leadership structure at large organizations are changing. Why is that?
Yeah. So, Shalom, you start to really see the trends probably going back, more than a decade, but particularly in the last 10 years, that virtually any large global business just figured out, from a pure competitive standpoint, that having the old school, if you will, traditional siloed structures just didn't provide the kind of synergy, innovation, efficiencies, streamlining, and then ultimately aligned execution that more nimble and agile organizations were delivering. And so it really just kind of almost became a mandate, even though, and obviously that's the focus of the book, it's not easy, but that there's so many business benefits from pivoting to this kind of integrated, sort of interdependent model.
And John, you have successfully completed over 500 one-on-one coaching engagements and facilitated over 1,000 training programs. So you certainly know a thing or two about sort of how a healthy and dynamic exchange of information should take place. But in a matrix organization, and perhaps let's start with defining what is a matrix organization. How do you foster that sort of that dialogue and that communication, those healthy relationships?
Yeah, and that's where it gets interesting fundamentally, right? And you asked a great question there. So in terms of the structure itself, it comes in many shapes and sizes. Shalom, there's some, that you would call kind of the very formal matrixed organizations that move the functional responsibilities into centers of excellence and sort of functional support and so forth. But many organizations also have what I'd call a more informal matrix. But essentially what's going to happen in any of those organizations is that the business and the function support are being asked now to work interdependently. And what that means, and probably what's most impactful, is that decision-making now doesn't just rest with one or two people, but you have a number of stakeholders that are engaged, that are a part of the decision-making process, and it's a process where oftentimes it's not clear who ultimately owns the decision, so it really asks for that level of collaboration, which means, to your point of, communication, relationship building, having trust, having transparency, allowing and being able to facilitate conversations that are both candid and direct, and there's a healthy exchange of ideas, but you're also balancing that with conviction and confidence, really becomes what will separate, good leaders from great ones, because they can no longer just rely on position power, or some kind of an org chart. That, the term often that gets used is influencing without authority, collaborating across boundaries. That I mean, and if you want to boil it down, in many ways, is kind of the quintessential challenge for leaders that are working in these matrix structures.
Absolutely. So, John, you and your colleague, your co-author, as we'll get into in a moment, wrote. Dr. Marty Seidman wrote a new book called "Leading in the Global Matrix." I had the chance to read it. It is a fantastic read, and I know that both of you. Through Optimum Associates, you are equipping leaders to optimize performance. So you've talked a lot about leading in the global matrix. So many of our listeners are in the small business world. They're entrepreneurs. It's an interesting time right now to be an entrepreneur, and we'll talk more about that throughout the program. But I'm curious how many of the lessons that you write about in your book and that we've sort of just started touching on, how it applies to a smaller organization as well.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And again, I think the skills are absolutely transferable. And in certain ways, you could even argue are almost more important. Because if you look at the essence of the mindset transition, the skill sets that we talk about in the book, it's really just about becoming an excellent collaborator, an excellent influencer, and just an excellent team member. So, skills around building and maintaining trust, which, intellectually it's obvious, but in reality is extremely fragile. As I said, the ability to corral and inspire in a small business, a group of folks to follow you, to balance a sense of you're empowered. I want you to feel like you're owners of the company. And we often talk about that entrepreneurial mindset or that own it mindset that you want to foster in a small business. Again, critical stuff. And I would say, Shalom, ultimately to your listeners that, there's a lot of concepts out there, and I used many of the buzzwords there, right? Entrepreneurial mindset, own it, collaboration, but those are really ultimately abstract. And usually, in rooms and boardrooms and so forth, everyone can agree, yeah, that's important stuff. But the real, to me, differentiator are those leaders, and whether in small business or in large business, that actually can embody the self-awareness and the skill set and the mindset to do that successfully. So whether it's, how effectively you're communicating in meetings to ensure there's inclusion and there's a good, healthy debate and discussion, putting, powerful ideas forward, being innovative, having that executive presence, equally important to, be listening, to be cultivating relationships and understand what makes people tick and how, what drives their thinking and their ideas. So, to me, again, whether you're in a small business or in a smaller business, this is really what the essence of the book is about. It's team, collaboration, influence, and all of that without essentially a heavy hand or just being able to dictate.
And we'll make sure our listeners know where they can pick up a copy of the book, Leading in the Global Matrix. So I'm chatting with John Futterknecht, and I know you told my producer that I could use just John F., but I'm so proud of the ability that I've rehearsed now to pronounce your full name. I'm just going to keep using it. The big $1 million question over here is sort of that trap that many leaders get stuck in. There's a trap in the gap between theory and practice. I think all leaders want to lead a certain way, but they get stuck in that gap between theory and practice. Why does that take place, and how do they get out of it?
That's really you named it, the $1 million question. So, and this is where and again, I know we're on here to talk about the book. This really isn't me coming out as a salesperson, but I'd say it's the distinction between coming at leadership, whether it's as an academic, as an author that focuses on theory, and in fact, even somebody who teaches seminars, which I do, versus spending most of your time as a coach. And in the end of the day, I would simplify and say the formula is, it's great to know what the what is, right? So what are the leadership skills, and you can label them and name them and even define them, and that's all really great. But then as far as translating that into the right behaviors or the behavior change to lead effectively, I would boil it down, one, self-awareness, right? We are all deeply ingrained, deeply habituated psychological beings that have habits, particularly interpersonal habits that, especially affect this kind of topic, that if we don't start with a really hard look at what are my tendencies, my biases, the ways that I tend to think and orient, because if you're not starting from that place, you're almost not going to have a chance. But then self-awareness is only the beginning, as they say, right? Knowing is half the battle. But then it becomes about cultivating the mindset. And you really see that with the matrix. Shalom, there's in leadership, in business in general, there's a lot of what I like to affectionately call control specialists, meaning leaders who like to be in control. They sometimes struggle. It's not as easy for them to let go, to engage in an interdependent, kind of ambiguous world and so forth. So you really have to intentionally cultivate the mindset that'll enable you then to lead in this way. And then ultimately it becomes about very specific skills and prescriptive behaviors, right down to choice of words, where you sit in a meeting, how you read people's body language. I could go on.
Sure.
But I would say often that's the gap.
And I know you talk a lot more about it in your book, Leading in the Global Matrix. So again, John Futterknecht, together with co-author Dr. Marty Seidman. It's a great read, Leading in the Global Matrix. John, how can people find the book and learn more about the work that you do?
Probably all the traditional channels. So obviously on Amazon would probably be the simplest, most direct way. Our publisher, Ben Bella. If you're an organization, you wanted to, get more copies, you can go there to get some discounts. But I think between those two, and then obviously our website, OptimaAssociates.com, we'll give you all the information.
Well, appreciate your time this evening, John Futterknecht. Thanks for joining me on Get Down to Business. We'll be back in just a moment. More about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship right after this quick break.
So we know